right, welcome everybody to Silicon Zombies, where we bring you the best brains from the Bay and beyond. What a marvelous treat it is to be at the beautiful Stanford campus with a bunch of delicious brains on the panel here. Before we get started, I want to do a shout out to our friends at Necodex. That's N-E-C-O-D-E-X. If you're building a product, if you need help with distribution or design, these folks are the group to talk to. And also, of course, I want to give a shout out to Zeiss, Fraunhofer, Joe Vex, the Consul General of Germany, and the Stanford German students as well, and of course our friends at GABA. So without any further ado, let's do a quick introduction to the panel. We've got Matt, Andreas, we've got Danielle, Carmen, and Sara. And you know, it's pretty fantastic because things are changing at a breakneck speed. Like technology is accelerating faster than ever before. We've got transportation, like planes, trains, and automobiles. We've got digital gene editing with CRISPR. We've got the legal space, these agentic frameworks that are penetrating every space of the economy. Fortunately, we've got all sorts of wonderful folks here who can help us understand not just what these technologies are, but how to build them into our own workflows so we can learn and earn and build community and have all sorts of fun while we're doing it. So talking about creating moats and building products and services of the future, let's go and have Matt Domo, if you wanted to do a quick introduction, please.
Yeah, hi. No, well, you got my name. So my name's Matt. I'll just said it again. I am a keynote speaker and an author and lead a consulting company. Built some decent sized products in the past. Was one of the founders of Amazon Web Services and built the database division from the ground up. SQL Server Enterprise from the ground up, the Rackspace Cloud, and Cortana and Windows. Now I write and speak, and I enjoy spending time with people who have major CPUs in their heads, like these folks, and trying to share knowledge to help you be successful with technology. So there we go.
Thank you. Ready to start, please.
Yeah, I'm Andreas. Hi, nice to be here. I'm from Germany, and there I'm working for Fraunhofer IPA. It's the Institute for Production Engineering and Automation, and there I'm responsible for everything we're doing in healthcare and life sciences. The interlinking of automation, technology, and life sciences, that's a very fascinating field for an engineer. And yeah, we do deep tech developments there and also found startups. I'm also involved in 3 of them too. And yeah, I like to push this forward.
All right.
Hi everyone, I'm Daniele Gammelli. I'm a postdoctoral researcher at Stanford University. Let me start by saying it's a great honor to be here. Over the last couple of years, we have been witnessing a real advancements in the field of AI, robotics, and autonomy, which I think is also a good reason why all of us are here today. And in my research, I focus on developing physical AI systems. That is, AI models or AI agents that are kind of instantiated on actual embodiments in the real world and learn from it, with particular applications to space robotics.
Hi everyone, my name is Carmen. It's such an honor to be here. I'm a postdoc fellow at Stanford, and I work on providing guarantees to AI systems. So I did my PhD on applied math and making sure that when we design systems, the behavior is as we expect, and we can guarantee things on their outputs. And witnessing all the advancements in AI, I figured that it was really important to bring in those tools to do the same with AI systems. That's my focus.
Hi everyone, my name is Sara Zare. I have a very peculiar background. I tried PhD in engineering twice, and it was not my thing. I ended up with 5 different engineering degrees. So kind of very holistically, I need to understand the world and talk about, generative AI, how it changes the world. And one of the biggest issues right now I'm learning about is in a few years, already today, we can't really differentiate between human created knowledge and content and AI generated. And in a few years from now, it will be virtually impossible, and then you're going to lose how knowledge is what's even the definition of it.
Mm.
So I'm working on an app to be able to create the walls of first-hand human knowledge, kind of safeguarded with our lives and against the AI in the post future. And yeah, I'm pleased to be here. Thank
Very
you
cool.
for having me.
Of course, of course. Let's like this candidate. And Dr. Carmen, we're gonna start with you. So applied mathematics in building these models, that's super fascinating stuff, especially as it pertains to safety. Because there are certainly some emergent properties which are unexpected. For example, sometimes these models will learn an entirely new language without being trained on that data set. Maybe just to kind of kick us off, why do you care about security in the first place, and how does mathematics blend into that space?
Sure. Yeah. Thank you so much for the question. So, I think that it's very important to first understand this idea of control. So if you ride a bike, if you've tried to like take off your hands, you can't do that for a few seconds, but then you have to grab it back on because you lose control, like you lose stability. So you need to put your hands to control where the bike's going. Well, we did the same with planes back in the day. Planes were taking off, but then when they crashing. And it wasn't only until we put in control that we were able to fly planes reliable and have the aviation industry be as safe as it is today. And today, thankfully, we live in a society where it's scandalous every time there is a plane crash, and we wouldn't accept as a society to board planes and say, well, sometimes this can crash. Like we have when we use ChatGPT, and it says, well, sometimes it can lie to you. So I think there's an ethical argument to be made here about the safety of this technology, but also I think for companies it's really important to understand that there's a legal framework that's going to be put in place, and even if it's not, this is controversial. So even if it takes a long time to be put in place, there's already laws like liability laws that would apply to these systems. So I think it's really important to have the mathematical tools that we, for example, use in aviation to be able to control these systems and have guarantees that at least bind ourselves from this liability claim, right? Because we know what the outputs are going to be, because we know how to control the systems in the same way that we can control a bike, and there's not a lot of mathematical tools to do that. Yeah.
Very well put. I love the analogy of aviation, because there's really no margin for error. Just as there's no margin for AI safety, we got to make sure that we stay in control. My understanding is that as we continue to build these models, it's becoming easier to see what's in that black box. Historically, it was kind of like an unknown. But moving on over to the economics and building a moat of protection, so you can build a product or a service that's going to be sustainable. That's maybe getting trickier and trickier. Feels like we're almost in a dust storm where it's kind of tricky to see what's right in front of us. Matt, when you co-founded AWS, maybe there was a little bit more consistency, both from a technology and a market space. Is that changing? Have things?
Okay. No, there was no consistency. We invented air, right? No, but it didn't exist, and we were looking at outside and saying, hey, it's at scale, and this was 2005 scale. Okay, you have to automate this. You have to create scripts. You have to remove the human error, but you also have to make it simple. And we're like, could we do this, and can we do it in a way that makes it simple, easy, frictionless, and reliable? I want to make those principles and everything you design still make sense today. You want to have winning difference, that's what you have. But honestly, we invented air. Nobody thought, internally, we're like, you're crazy. That's not going to work. And we did, and we kept going. And so here's my thing. Lots of people say, hey, what I create a boat or a moat, or I can't be last. Look, you want to get away from the bear? Don't be last in line. Anywhere else, go.
Who's the bear in this analogy?
Whoever you think your competitor is, or whoever you think you have to beat, or whoever you have to think is going to make you and your solution not effective. Right?
Okay.
The mind's a terrible trap, right? Really is. You can convince yourself that the bad things can happen. You need to invert yourself and say, I'm gonna go forward, I'm gonna go figure it out, I'm gonna work backwards from my customer. What delights them, what makes them happy, what makes them want to use this thing? And that's what we found when we did this. And I'm gonna say, look, even with all the technologies we have now, there's some super cool ones. It's still the same principle. Huh? That's what I gotta say.
And still over 80% of data is not stored in the cloud. It's on-prem, which is a little shocking.
It is like I created the database division. So and SQL Server Enterprise way back when. And listen to that number. Think about it. Like the amount of data is going to grow by 75% worldwide just this year. Worldwide. And 80% of it's still not in the cloud. So think about what you have to do to do that and how to maximize it and all the things that Carmen said. Yeah, you got to think about security and all those things. It's real stuff. But yeah, hope that answered your question.
Yeah, definitely. And it seems like there's a lot of that happening in robotics too. Daniel, maybe who's the bear? Who are the folks to be in that
I
space?
actually wanted to jump in on Carmen's because I think Carmen's analogy with aviation and safety is particularly fitting. Because there is a lot of high level strategies that I think will be kind of critical also when you look at AI agents. For example, like what is really important in aviation, there is triple, quadruple redundancy in systems, which is particularly useful. There is an entire, there's a plethora of systems that are like, for example, the air traffic controls that are basically surrounding the aviation industry, making sure that it's always under control and in the domain where it's capable of operating safely. Which I think are all things that are not currently in place for AI systems in general, and I think businesses should kind of try to kind of move ahead of this curve in terms of safety and making this like a priority when you're building a new product or service. And I would add to that also open source is probably a good shot at safety. By open source, I mean kind of going against kind of products that are purely closed and proprietary, but things that are open source to the community where everybody can actually inspect, find bugs, iterate fast. And so I think that this analogy is actually extremely good. And to your point in terms of robotics, I think the key point there is really trying to build your organization as a data factory. Because in robotics, I mean, data, we're saying it over and over today, is the key, right? Is the new oil, for instance. But especially for robotics, like access to data is particularly expensive because you need, real world, hardware embodiment of these systems. And so if you really want to scale, I think it's really important that you structure your entire organization in a way where there is a kind of high quality data channels and workflows that are, you have high quality labels across your organization and that there is no bespoke solution for anything that you're trying to solve.
Very well put. Did you want to talk?
I want to add something that safety and security and accuracy are very, very valid concerns. I'm very happy a lot of effort is being done in fixing them. Another part that, as I said about the topic that I'm thinking about these days is it even possible to ever have an AI that is 100% correct? Like, what does that even mean? There's this term called curse of knowledge that even between human to human, we say what we think, what we say, and what the other person hears are two different things. They're never even the same because, if I'm talking to you right now about this topic, there's a million different references and synapses that I can talk about and I choose what is most appropriate and then I say it so it's always different than what I know. And what you hear is just literally what your context is and how you can understand it. So when we can't have this like traceability of truth and consistency in human conversation, because literally it's impossible, how do we expect it from AI models? And the reason that is important, and I have been trying to make an example of is like literally, this is called like kind of like extended drift that, we just lose touch with what the source is and where it comes because, AIs are really good at creating very good sounding coherent messages that might be a misunderstanding, like what they ask is not what you ask. It might be just completely mistake. You talk about fusion as in, I don't know, cuisine, and they think nuclear fusion.
Mhm.
And it could be, did I lose the sound?
Let's just keep rolling.
Oh, okay. And then And it could be malicious, hopefully that we have guardrails against. But I asked ChatGPT, like, how could it happen that, for example, when I write this article about, knowledge integrity crisis, how could it in a few generations of, AI models creating synthetic data, we train next generation, and they create synthetic data, and then a few generations removed from what I have written, what is going to happen to my content and this concept? And it literally came up with examples of how this could happen. For example, it gave me a sentence example as in the merger or after the merger, the company kept the name, but everything, operations completely changed. And the next model could create after the merger, they kept the branding and changed operations. There is not a significant wrong between these two interpretations. But then the third generation could be, a merger happened, they didn't change the name and they adjusted operations. And then you can go and look one step by step, tiny little changes that are not wrong. We have the context, we can understand when we compare, but 3 generations down the road, the message has completely changed.
Yeah.
So the question is that when the best of guardrail and best intention, when they understand the topic and they want to tell you something, the point is they don't really understand, which kind of is also debatable. They read what I have written and they recalculate the statistical dependency and connection between different, not even full words, but tokens. Sometimes the word would be broken into several parts. And then based on that, magically, they create a cohesive text. So this thing that they create, first generation, let's say 98% of the content and context I had. The second one loses another 2%. 10th generation down the road, 90% is true to what I said, but what is that 10%? That is just purely generated by AI based on some rather grammatically accurate statistical association. What is the source of knowledge? Do you consider this knowledge?
Yeah. I love how you mentioned the curse of knowledge, because to me, it's like knowledge is easily accessible, and AI is like intelligence on demand. You get ChatGPT or Gemini or one of these models, and you've got access. Well, I think wisdom maybe could be like something that we add some humanity to. And it's interesting that we were talking a little bit about the open source space. I'm curious about how that relates to the medtech space, specifically in biology. Andreas, this is your area of expertise. Is it better to open source, kind of like how we did with, not DeepMind, but what was it, the human genome sequencing? And so that in that way you were able to provide that, Meta was able to provide that to researchers. Did that move the needle for us, Andreas?
Yeah, I'm sure that this will happen, but I'm sure that there is still a lot of homework to do, because especially in life sciences and healthcare, we still derive very much on experiences of humans which are not documented. Imagine a medical doctor, a surgeon who have done a specific surgery for 20 years. He will ever be better than a young surgeon. And it's the same with life science processes. We have to control them, we have to measure what's going on there, and it's so new and it's so unspecified currently. We have to develop sensors, we have to monitor this, we have to grab up the data. And based on this, then we can start to simulate this, and then we can start to generate models based on this. And also to simulate and generate new data, and then AI comes.
Augmentation, which is separate from fine tuning. I just figured this out. Matt, looks like you wanted to talk.
Well, no, I find what you work on fascinating. We have 8 billion walking chemistry sets across the world right now. There's not a one size fits all thing, right? You give a medicine, some people react one way, others another way. Even in my own house. My wife and my oldest son got COVID. My younger son and I never did. I chuck it to tequila, different story. And everybody's got their thing, right? And so what is that saying? We're building meta models to help us track through the chemistry set and find what works and what doesn't. That brings data, implications of the quality of data that feeds into what's being done. It brings security implications. We have access to what makes people tick, right? Got to protect that. But there's some really, really interesting things coming out. Like there's no better time to be alive than right now. Think about the pace of innovation things are found. My father's 89. He has Alzheimer's. Back in August, researchers found the beginnings of the proteins using AI that trigger Alzheimer's before it even shows. Okay, so super awesome. We found out where it begins. Now, people like this big brain and others are going to go figure out how do we make that better. And that's where we are. And this is it. I mean, it's cool we're going to work on the diagnosis, but we also have to work on the patient side, right? You present E. pluribus unum. I'm really scared. No, you got a cold, right? Make it simple. Make it for the user. Make sure they understand what their treatment is and why you're doing it and what's the impact and how it will affect them. This is the way with these things with the package of data, the analysis, the gender of AI are going to change the way we diagnose, the way we treat, and the way we explain it to the humans, the 8 billion chemistry sets we all are right now. And I think that is awesome.
It does seem like peeking around the corner, or maybe having a low latency, having maybe information at our fingertips as fast as possible is important. Like not just in science, like we mentioned a little bit about Alzheimer's, which is really cool. And in fact, there's a company called True Binding that has found the drug's called TB006, which is a monoclonal antibody that is able to attach to galectin-3, which is a multifunctional protein. It's pretty wild, right? Like if we can stop this cognitive decline, then that means we're going to live longer, happier, healthier. But I am curious about when it comes to, again, like reeling it back, building products and building services, how can we create that moat that protects us so, I don't know, some of these foundational models aren't going to replace that in like 6 months. So how are we, Dr. Carmen, how are you thinking about this?
Yeah, I think this is a very difficult question. I personally don't have an answer. I would say something nuanced about open source, and Eli brought it up. So imagine that there is an autonomous car going rogue in the streets. Then and then that car like kills somebody. Who's liable for that? We can trace back if it's the manufacturer, is the person who deployed it, something like that. With AI and open source, this traceability becomes really hard. So although it provides this amazing opportunity for treating diseases, diagnosing, and all of that, it can also be used for creating bioweapons or threats to us, and how are we going to shield against that? My personal take is we build those guardrails inside of the model so it cannot be misused, and that way we can protect the open sourceness of it while encrypting this guardrails into it so that it can't be misused. But I think how to do that technically is hard, and how to create a collective effort so we're all on the same page is also hard.
Yeah.
So to this, I had an event last year about cybersecurity, and the future of the world post-generative AI topic. And the question was, the best of intention, we'll build all the guardrail, as you said, to make sure the outcome is not, something harmful. But at the same time, in the dark web, there are these services that you pay $200 a year, and you have access to these generative AI models with no guardrail. That that's horrible, because when you go to the cybersecurity conference and everything, the number of attacks, the sophistication, even the phishing emails, they're uncanny. Like
Do you think that those models are able to be more innovative though? And is that important?
Innovation is one thing, but the thing that somebody needed probably a week work to create like a really elaborate attack scheme, and now they can create it within 15 minutes working with these models, that's scary.
Yeah.
The fact that maybe before, like there were like 6,000 known, if I'm not mistaken, like individuals and network of malicious attacks, and now there are tens of thousands, because everybody could just pay that 200 and sit like, then human creativity, there is no end. So there are a lot of challenging things that we have to always, I always say the world is not black and white, it's always somewhere in the middle of the gray scale. And because if you think black and white is like very disempowering, but when we know there's a gray scale, we can think of ways to shift it. Like I love the idea that guardrail has to be in the model.
So
Not something that you can jailbreak it.
In the Wild West, just like it's a runaway train. It's important for us to get it before China does, because then there's downstream implications. How are we thinking about this over here? Feel free to jump in.
Yeah, to the point where I think what will probably be key in order to be able to defend a technology will be the combination of ease of access to intelligence through one of these foundation models and proprietary and specialized data. Because we are clearly going towards a future where each and every one of us will have access to its own AI companion. And also this is true also for businesses. And this is why open source will play a big role, because I don't see this future being as a closed source kind of proprietary model from a specific company being deployed to all of us. But every one of us will have access to its own specific AI companion that's been trained on its own data. And this is, if you look at it then from, you put yourself in the perspective of the business, then this means you will have your own AI models that are trained on your own data, which you have been producing. And this will really be key, because there will be no closed source model that will be able to kind of combat this, because you will be access to high level intelligence together with a kind of proprietary data.
Yeah.
Yeah, please.
Yeah. Hey, look, security is a feature, not a bug. Can we just lay it out? Security is a feature, not a bug. It's not an afterthought. So a lot of what we're saying is what could go wrong. Okay, so that's how do I recover from bad people doing bad things, right? That's a reactive posture. Now think about what we have together available right now, data. All the top risks are out there, right? OWASP has a list. Your company has a list. 67% of breaches are caused by human error, right? You know the policies in your company. So where am I going? I have data that informs me in the long term. I'm building stuff inside my company that releases vulnerabilities. Instead of reacting, proact. Use agents and use some of these technologies that you have to automate and put agents that are monitoring for these risks. So you detect them as soon as they open. Am I violating my IT policy? Again, constantly scan, make sure I'm there. What am I trying to do? Reduce new time to discovery. Then there are products that are out there that will scan nefarious traffic patterns, which to his point is where the human and machine partnership lives. I'm going to have the security operations center, and yep, I'm going to have my AI tools, and they're going to scan, they're going to catch all the stuff, and they're going to come up and say, hey, Matt, there's something going on here. Do you want me to fix it? But it's still going to be the brain of a human that has to make the strategic decisions of what to do. The humans can say, hey, this is a pattern. The machines will say it's a pattern that looks nefarious, but it's going to take us communicating together, saying, this is a pattern that looks bad. What do we do collectively? Defense, private companies, what we do in the algorithms. And it's going to take that collaboration. And sorry, machines are never going to do that for us. And nor should they. We own that relationship. And that's where we are.
Well, I mean, it does feel like some of these larger, older legacy companies could be potentially threatened by AI first or AI native companies. Like, I'm not going to pick on Amazon, but like, let's look at Salesforce, for example. They're paying like $1 million bonuses to tens of thousands more of individuals. When now this new agentic framework is going to be able to replace a lot of that utility. Are a lot of these older companies? Is Mark Benioff shaking in his boots? What happens if that tree crashes? Does that mean that new companies are going to sprout from? What do you think, Matt?
Sure. Okay. There's two age-old things. Sorry, I always do 2 or 3 things. You're going to get used to that. So first thing, we've always done it that way as a death knell of my company. That's exactly what you just said. Now, there's many leaders, whether you're a leader now or you're a leader in the future. Guess what? The same thing applies to you. I've always done it that way as the death knell of my career. You have to constantly look. What you're saying is, what got us here won't take us there. Where should we work backwards from our customers and reimagine and reinvent the way we delight them? And by the way, our employees too. companies do a really bad job of thinking about how do I make employees productive, happy, learning, doing stuff. Automating this is the same way. So if you're a leader here, forget the stick, the left behind stuff. You control your own destiny. Work backwards from your customer across every step in their brand. Understand what delights them, what makes them happy, what makes them want to use, consume, do whatever, and go figure that. Then go figure out what your employees to achieve that at every step. What do we do to make it simple, easy, frictionless, and reliable, right? You do that, and it doesn't matter whether you're bolting on or buying. You're focused on what you own. Go own it.
So,
But don't do what you always did.
so I agree with you, and all the principles of how to build an amazing product and be successful. But the math has slightly changed. And then, for example, right now when I'm due diligencing startups and reviewing the tech stack, you see that 6 months ago, 12 months ago, 18 months ago, they start with this really sophisticated commitment to build something, their tech stack and then the technical moat. But right now, already, even 6, 8, 10 months later, one of these big models have already incorporated that. And I'm like, is this actually their moat, or is this technical liability? They're going the complicated way to maintain all this sophisticated infrastructure that is not needed anymore. It's just some things have changed, and then it comes back to this extraordinary rapid change of advancement that were not predictable. And to your question earlier, you asked about moat. How could you build a moat? The best advice I can give to startups right now is to build something that is actually not going to be a future feature on one of the existing models and these big companies. Rather, a very smart way to use this model to do something, to build an app, experience, and frictionless is definitely the most important things in future product development. Because we hear it all about interface is gonna go to verbal. I have been working on Podyar, this thing about knowledge capturing and sharing, and I keep thinking, okay, how can I make it more frictionless and simpler? Because why not? My claim is to remove friction of capturing human knowledge, and it comes down to why do I even need to have a UI? It has to be conversation.
You mentioned delighting the customer and having a closed loop of feedback, but Sara mentioned that could completely disappear in the next 3 to 6 months. What say you?
Okay. You are building an airship, spaceship, either one works, right? It can never land. Design accordingly. You're going to fuel in air. How do I design a system like that? How do I design the pieces that are a component? How many watch fans? Come on, I know there's some here. Raise your hand, show me.
Watches?
Old Rolex watch. Everybody's got them, right? You ever look at them? Really look closely, take it apart. It's how'd they do that? All that little complex stuff. A collection of small things that do one thing really well. That principle goes here. So I'm going to design a pipeline for my flight of my airplane. I'm going to assume at some point the engine's going to have to get swapped out. So the things that depend on the engine, how do I minimize the change necessary to do the open heart surgery to do it? Replace the tires, same thing. Build bigger wings, same thing. Think about how to build flexibility into your architecture and figure out when something changes and becomes better or antiquated, then figure out how to do it. But also take some objective analysis and get hands-on yourself. I see lots of people make mistakes. Well, brand X over there invented this and they run their whole company on it. But is that experience what you're delivering in yours and what you're trying to design and what you're trying to build? Because what happens over there may not be right for your customers and your employees. So it's kind of a framework. We could go on and on. That's why we have bars.
I love that you
Here
say
we go.
that. I love that you say that. And speaking of, so who's heard of Acquired, the podcast? It's a pretty good one. If you're looking for a good podcast, check them out. They just recently went over Rolex, and what made Rolex really special, since you mentioned it, was these different groups where they would find the best person of all these. There's like 200 different pieces in a watch, and then they would bring those together. So kind of a very unique model that was almost like open source before open source was a thing. But perhaps that same space exists in robotics. I mean, Danielle, it was pretty interesting. I was in LA about a month ago, and I saw a bipedal robot walking across the street. And I was like, it's like, is this real? This is crazy. So when are we going to see this like on a daily basis, do you think?
So I think that, as I mentioned at the beginning, over the last like 3 to 4 years, we have really been seeing a number of key breakthroughs in specific areas, which are really changing the way in which we develop autonomous systems in general and robotics as a specific case. And I really think that we are getting close. And you see a number of companies for example, if you take humanoids companies, they're really popping up like mushrooms, right? They're everywhere. And I think that, in a very short time, it could be 3 to 5 years or 5 to 10 years. There's like a very high chance that we're gonna see like the ChatGPT moment for robotics, because we're starting to get there. We are really changing the paradigms in which these systems are being trained, from like hard engineering, like domain specific ways of approaching things, to more things like are more generally applicable that basically get lessons learned from AI. And so I think that, it's really going to be an exciting time for robotics.
One of the breakthroughs that happened in the past couple of years is computer vision, right? Like no longer can you just do object detection, but now they're layering on natural language too. So you can communicate with these models, like find me the crack in the solar panel, or predict when there's going to be a problem at a construction zone to reduce liability and all the rest. Maybe there's some interesting spaces that you're seeing, like integrations, like intersection for these quantum leaps in an experience. Are you seeing something similar, Carmen?
I am seeing how this multimodal space is being like taken up more recently with from the research like part of it, but also probably from companies. I want to emphasize Matt's point of security is a feature, and you want to design your systems in a principled way. What I'm seeing with all this multimodal stuff, a lot of it is it's a little bit hacky. Like it works on your benchmark, but is this really scalable? Is this going to really propel in the long term? Unclear. And that's because we don't really understand the components to a great depth. We just know it sort of works, and we just keep going with that. But I'm worried about that approach to things. Yeah.
You think it's a little too cavalier, or?
I think that's not like I'm gonna take us back to aviation. Like things were getting off the ground in the very early 20th century, but it wasn't until planes became very reliable and safe that aviation really changed the way we or mobility around the world and how we all travel and everything.
It is kind of interesting how like tech has the ability to change our behaviors, and we're accelerating. Like no part of reality right now is normal. We're like in a shift. From the Wright brothers taking off with Kitty Hawk, 66 years later, we're on the moon. So things are accelerating in a pretty crazy way. How do we stay sane? How do we still educate ourselves to integrate this into how we're, building products and building community?
I think change is hard for humanity. Like we all like the way we like their life as much as we could get excited. There's a human psychology, like accepting and adapting to change, especially in mass, is hard and is messy. So everything that we see, like majority of the changes and innovation possibilities we see about with generative AI, they have been repeated in one form or the other. It's just a fractal that keeps repeating itself, the confusion of the new thing. And then you understand this thing, like for example, multimodal is like literally integrating 2-3 different systems, right? Each of them on their own could be very functional, very safe, but like when you integrate them together, would they really the math of the security safety would work? Probably not, unless you either build from scratch all of these features and capability together, or whatever innovative way it comes. One area that I started hosting my events last year, for example, was when early 2023, with all my engineering degrees, I started to try to understand Gen AI, it was intimidating. It was really hard. Like, how do I understand? How do I make sense of it? And if I'm a lawyer, if I'm an accountant, even if I'm a software engineer, not every software engineer understands generative AI or even AI. So my effort and goal was, again, actually borrowing from the aviation analogy, I was saying, like, let's say you're like the smartest aviation engineer.
You point to Hassan when
He's a good friend of mine, and he's super smart. So it kind of
he
applies.
gives great hugs too. If you're
I know.
Hassan.
So, let's say you're building the most advanced airplanes to launch them in the world, right? But does it mean how to pilot a plane? Not necessarily if you're an aviation engineer. Do you know how to build an airport, how to run control tower? What is the impact of this new technology you're building in global economy, in global warming? Or even if this tool you're building, is it going to be used for humanitarian purposes or human trafficking? Right? Like the inventors and founders and entrepreneurs are all building a tool, leaving it in the world, and they're like scientists and researchers like you that, like worry about the right things, about very important things. Are these safe and secure? But then one problem with that is majority of events when they talk about AI, they're inviting like the CEO of this aerospace company and ask all these other questions about what the world is going to be. And it doesn't work that way. It's just ridiculous. Inviting like giving the microphone to these people and ask them to tell us how the world will change is not. So I like, like having people with expertise in different fields. They have to tell us what is changing in their field and how, what are the potential of Gen AI to help them make processes easier, more reliable to some extent, and what are the things we need to be really, really careful about.
That's a really good point. In fact, our friend Joseph Manafra, who does a really cool job, he's head of innovation at NASA. He said when he's tackling real large existential challenges, he'll get people who are experts from all sorts of different fields, like a professional motocross racer, maybe a professional opera singer, and then create this space of psychological safety where we can talk about ideas and not feel like we're going to get judged, because oftentimes it's outside of the box thinking that can inspire us to get to the next level. We do want to save a couple minutes for some folks in the audience. So we've got some delicious brains up here. So if you have a question, start thinking about that. And maybe in the meantime, Matt, I saw you nodding along. Did you have something you wanted to hop in here?
No, I was just saying, hey, let's have at it.
Yeah.
Come at me, bro. Let's go.
Okay. Yes.
So there's been some, going back to math and the 80s, there's been some research way back even when you have very simple autonomous agents. They start collaborating. Think of the market and people trying to understand that. You end up with chaotic behavior. And so the question here is, what happens when even these simple systems, not even the complex ones, start interacting with each other, and not just the human interacting with ChatGPT, etc., but these things are talking to each other. What are the situations that we can see, right? And we see some of this already with the electric grid and other places where suddenly something goes wrong and nobody knows even what it was. Maybe somebody cutting a tree in Canada, right? New York, the lights go on. We had that already. So my question is, how do we guard against this? Which is B section of that question. I'm a pilot. And one of the biggest things we fight with is the human-machine interface. Because when the pilot needs to interact because the autopilot fails, for whatever reason, sensor failing, something, the pilot is so far behind the autopilot and where the plane is, the situational awareness. So my question on that is, how do we maintain the situational awareness on these complex systems working together?
Wow, that's a marvelous fact. I feel like you should. Yeah. So we do have this substrate where the agents are interacting. A2A, I think MCP is another standard. Carmen, Danielle, did either of you want to kind of hop in and figure out how to address that?
Yeah. So first of all, it's a great question. Obviously, the space of answers could be huge. Like my take on it is that it will be probably the combination of putting in place these redundant guardrails that across the entire process of operations of these autonomous agents and the collaboration between these agents, together with I think the instantiation of what is usually referred to as data flywheels, which is basically this idea of the interaction between human and the machine at different levels in the data generation process. So we will be, at the beginning, you'll have, a machine and an agent that interact with each other, and maybe there's need for more human supervision than in other stages, right? So at the beginning, the human will be more present. By being present, it will generate again this data pipeline of good corrections of behavior on which the machine can then be trained on. And then you can probably start to imagine that if you start to instantiate this feedback through continuously, you basically get this constant feedback from the machine, which will get better and better at verifying itself in a way. And so I think, at least my take, is this combination of structural guardrails across the entire deployment of these agents, together with high quality data flywheels, which enable for kind of automatic corrections of errors.
Wow.
Can I say something?
Yeah, and then Andreas, please. After you.
Oh.
No, you first.
Oh, okay. Yeah, I just wanted to add a couple of points. You mentioned that the math was really hard to try to understand, like even simple agents. I want to say that the math is also advancing, and my own PhD was in understanding the power network and this large-scale networks, how to localize disturbances. So if a tree falls in Canada, well, the power outage is localized to that region, that kind of thing. We do have ways of guaranteeing that with the math. And the reason for that is, if you think about it, there's nothing harder than turbulence. Like for turbulence, we have equations, we don't even know how to solve them. Like this is a problem today. And yet we can fly no problem, because when you put in guarantees, you don't need to fully understand the whole system, you just need to understand a few key things, right? So I think all of these tools could apply to that.
I have an engineering perspective on this. Typically, when we engineer a technical system, we do some risk analysis. We test the risk that we found out, and afterwards we implement this, and then we trust it is as safe as possible. So if you have a lot of small systems that interact in a different way, and the overall system is developing over all the time, it's not even more possible to forecast all the things that could happen in future. So the principle of risk analysis should be implemented in the small pieces of technologies which are there, and this one should be able to be reliable. What happens when I do this? What happens when I send this information? What happens when I accept this information I got from anyone else? So that's, I think, the important thing. And that's a typical technical approach there. And this is necessary to implement. And then the system overall is also able to explain what it's doing. We cannot do, but the system can do.
Hi, I'm Carl. Thanks so much for the super insights. I think I took away a lot of hope from, hey, for these tech-induced problems that we're creating for ourselves, and hoping that the opportunity is greater, but for the problems we will have tech solutions. Got it. What are the human systems that we need to be in place to go along with that as well? How do we battle human inertia? How do we battle that there's decades of incentives in humans, in organizations that are already in place, which the AI has no idea of these incentives, doesn't care about them. Bad actors have a whole different set of incentives that organizations or humans have otherwise. What are the human systems, social, political, or otherwise, that need to be put in place now?
Can I?
How do we find those ones?
Okay. So a couple things. First, starting in 2020, we entered the era of me, right? Us as consumers, us as users, us as people in business. We were isolated in our offices, whatever the trigger was, but what do we want? What can you do for me? What do you do to make it simple for me? At every touch point of your application or your brand and the way I interact with you at a business, I want you to get me. I want you to find me where I am. I want it delivered where I am, how I want it at that time, right? So unfortunately, guilty as charged. We would build products based on what we had and what's a good way we can do what I got and hope somebody will use it, right? See the inversion? Now I'm starting with me. My customer is me. How do I hyper-personalize it? to the flight person, the future of experience is immersive. It's not your grandfather's metaverse, right? It's about an experience. We experience things. We have intelligence. So based on how I'm using it, the experience adapts to get me what I want. That's AI, multiple different kinds, natural language, machine learning, predictive analytics. It's data. So we're making the experience of something not that we browse, it's what we experience and the intelligence to support it, to support me and my success. Me, the customer. Also, I can't tell you this enough. You want to scale your business? Make your employees productive and effective. Your point about getting over the fear, start with employee as me. What are you going to do to make me, the employee, successful? What am me going to learn from it? What does that set me up to do? What does it help me achieve with my goals? See my point?
And again, going back to the fractal, this has happened several times. Like when you think about like when consumer products became really good and better and better. I remember 2014 when I joined Google. Around that time, it's still enterprise products were shit. Like they were terrible experiences, you know. Like, and some of the products I was managing, they were serving internal Google staff on like really huge scale. And I'm like, why do we build these shitty products? Why can't we build better enterprise? And everybody's like, well, because, you know, when you're building something for enterprise, it's just about, you know, compliance and, you know, make sure accountability, blah, blah, blah. I'm like, still, why can't we? And then nobody kind of believed in that. And then we had like Slack come and Miro come and then Figma come and all these like enterprise level tools. Now, to your point, the expectation of employees is like, whatever you give me to just do my job has to be amazing. Right? I'm not gonna like back in the day who worked with Salesforce. It was a nightmare, right? And so that this is like going back to the mode, you know, frictionless user experience and hyper focused on user satisfaction. We define these like metrics of, what product, the initiative we built was product excellence. And it was like how to productize technology that is a delightful experience for users, right? So to your answer, like what we can do for humanity and what they want to do, they have very, very high expectations, and we kind of have the tools to deliver. So whoever combines these would be winners of the future.
Great. Another question? Yes, please, sir.
Hi, I'm President again with the Freer Foundation. We have about 20,000 people on the peninsula that earn income driving taxi cabs for Uber, whatever. And Waymo is very close to being able to carry somebody from San Francisco to San Jose and vice versa. What can we do to build an economy that they can use to pay their rent when they can't make money driving a car anymore?
That's a great question. Maybe we could steer this towards universal basic income, right? So like around 1900, the most popular job was a barrel maker, and then the railroads quickly wiped that job out. Do you think universal basic income, or maybe even universal basic compute, has a future? Matt, did you want to hop in, or
Anybody else want to go?
Danielle, please.
I mean, it's a humongous question, right? And I think it boils down to also like the philosophical implications of what is the role of humans in the more we get capable systems, both thinking systems that are in the software, but also physical systems. I mean, in general, here, kind of my take is that I am extremely optimistic about the future, because there is the usual kind of discussion on will AI take my job, right? And I think here is that rather than seeing this in a pessimistic way, kind of my take at least is that AI will actually be an incredible enabler, and I think a good frame of reference is like whatever an individual can do in a week, for example, we'll soon be able to do this, imagine, in a matter of seconds, right? So when we could be one or multiple AI agents that basically do our tasks, both in the kind of software space, but also in the physical space, as I think you were also mentioning. And so this is where I'm actually quite have a strong opinion on this, in the sense that I think we should embrace this optimism and try to build services around this idea where the productivity of each individual human is enhanced by orders of magnitude, essentially.
To answer your question, let's work backwards from me, right? You get the theme, right? So your employees driving these taxis. You know what's a really hard problem for people delivering goods? Last mile. Is Waymo going to do that? I don't know. So maybe you can't put a distribution system in the community where you are in a supply chain and you become the last mile. Why? You're creating value, right? The difference of how I'm going to evolve, what have you, my product, my company, my organization, what value am I providing to the people that depend on me, right? So that's an option, maybe. And look to the fear factor. How many of you guys looked at a major metropolitan downtown? Skyscrapers, all that. Raise your hand, you done that. Right? You know what created that? The elevator. In the early 1900s, the elevator came out. Same thing. Oh my gosh, there's no air in there, and they might go down. And those very dapper dressed gentlemen, what's going to happen to their jobs, right? I walk around, they're still there. Timeless beauty that changed the skyline of the world. Glass. We never would have thought of that. Architecture, the things to build all that. Cranes, new ways of doing electricity, new ways of doing light. Who would have thought we would have had cubicle hell, then switch to all the things that happen to that. That's where we are right now.
Matt, I love that you mentioned the elevator. Just a couple days ago, I saw a company that's building an elevator with no pulleys. It's all vacuum. It looks, it's completely glass and transparent. It looks like the elevator out of Charlie and the Chocolate Factory. You guys know what that's like. So it feels like it's kind of touching everything. So we are almost at time, and I want to make sure that the zombie community can be helpful and valuable to what each of you are building. So Sara, maybe let's start with you. Would you like to plug a website, or maybe how folks can connect with you, or how can we be helpful to what you're building?
I am building Podyar. That's the frictionless, gathering human information to safeguard it from AI contamination. So reach out to me on LinkedIn. I'm starting to create a list of early testers. And the first iteration, probably the idea is, what if podcasting, instead of waiting to be invited to be in the seat, what if there was a tool that the host was AI?
You're trying to replace my job. Okay, next. I'm just kidding.
Every time we talked about this, I said no.
Yes. I'm supremely offended right now.
It's a compliment. It's a complimentary service where you can go and then share and record. We are still gonna be friends, right?
Yes.
I will root for universal income.
Okay, good. I'm okay with that.
But anyhow, reach out to me on LinkedIn if you want to. So the idea is there's an AI host. Anytime you have something to share and want to share, you can go and record it. And also there's an element of continuity. Like, let's say you're like, oh my God, Carmen is so smart. I want to learn more from her. You can't go and search what other podcast she was on, because it could be on a different topic, or if it was similar topic, it might be a lot of overlap. So you can't follow someone. So I'm trying to also solve that. So you can also go and be the guest and share all of your expertise. Yes, okay. Thank you.
Dr. Carmen, please.
Yeah, so you can find me if you Google my name, and I have a website, you can find me there. I'm very interested in controllable AI and building controllers for foundation models. So if that's at all your interest, I would be delighted to talk about it. I also have a lot of conversations at the law school at Stanford, and I'm very interested in policy in general, and also how AI is going to impact labor. So if you're interested about that, also feel to talk about that.
Excellent.
As Carmen said, please do reach out to my channels, LinkedIn, websites. In general, if you're interested in building physical AI and its applications to specifically space robotics or aerospace, please, I'm always happy to engage in conversations. I'll give a shout out to the newly formed Center for Aerospace Autonomy Research at Stanford, on which I'm a research fellow at. So please do reach out if you're interested in these teams.
Please go ahead.
Yeah, same with me. You can find me over the typical way. So if you are interested to get information about personal medication, personal treatment in healthcare, and how we can make this possible and affordable for huge masses, contact me and let's discuss about this.
Yeah, hi. Yeah, you can connect with me on LinkedIn or mattdomo.com, my speaking. But my team and I, the Avengers of AI, and yes, I do have the trademark, we're here to help you. We're friendly anti-consultants. And our mission is to help you define your mission possible, exceed your goals, and be the hero. So if you need some help with this, reach out. We're friendly and we're here to help.
Fantastic. Deep, we'll hold questions for after because we want to keep the train going. But thank you so much. You want to play the outro for us? Great. All right. Thank you so much, everybody. Really enjoyed the panel. For more of the best brains, go to siliconzombies.com. Give us a like, give us a follow. And also shout out to Gaba. Thank you so much, you guys.